Hey, Jason.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I feel like I'm talking to a relative.
I am so happy to hear that, but I'm also so happy that that we have a season 2 of the Santa Clauses because Christmas came early for me when I binge watched this last week.
I love to hear that. I love it. You're amongst the very first people to have seen the whole thing, so I love hearing that.
It is absolutely fantastic and fun. I emailed to Kelsey. I think I said sleigh bells are ringing for this one.
That's what we were going for. We had a ball making it, and, you know, my goal is always, especially with a comedy, to try and put fun on screen, and I think we pulled it off this time.
You really did. Season 1 was perfect, grounded, funny, but you really upped the ante with season 2. And that's what really impressed me. And you didn't let it stagnate. The scripts are tight. We get to see growth in the characters. You know, Tim Allen is always going to be Santa and Scott. And there's no really changing him. He's so set in his ways. So you very smartly, we get to see Cal and Sandra. Their game gets upped. They're dealing with issues that teenagers would deal with, but on an elevated level because of magical Santa powers that come from being the children of Santa at the North Pole. And I love what you have them dealing with and coming into their own and finding their own path. And this is where La Befana really comes into play with the Sandra storyline. And that is so grounded in real life. I think everybody out there, girls in particular, they always had a very special aunt. You know, there's a reason you have grandparents and aunts.
I mean, you're getting all the sort of that's really the fun of this franchise and this series, is getting to do real, relatable, real world stories hidden inside of this larger than life legend of Santa Claus and the North Pole.
That really comes through, Jason. And that I was really pleasantly surprised to see that. Because so often when you get into the second or third season of something, you're still kind of looking at the same thing overall.
Yeah.
And this is why a lot of shows don't go beyond one season or maybe two. Because they stagnate. And they're not relatable, because as your audience gets older, you've got to grow. The show has to grow with the audience.
Yep.
And you really handle that so well here. But that then begs the question. Season 1 ends. It's a huge success. Everybody clamoring for season 2. I was clamoring as soon as I binge watched. Before it was released, season 1, I was yelling I wanted season 2. Now I'm yelling I want season 3. How do you top and build on the movies that came before, the first season of the series, because you tie the film history in exceedingly well, too. We get some beloved characters back. We get to the climactic episodes at the end of the season. And of course, we hear more about our beloved Bernard and Curtis, and Charlie gets shout outs. So how do you build on a legend and still make it fresh and up the ante?
Well, I mean, good storytelling comes from, I think, genuine inspiration. And I think that it didn't feel like a job, like we have to do another season. It felt like, you know what? As goofy and wild as this world is, we're all having a ball and feeling inspired by it. And bit of a Game of Thrones parody joke.
Mm-hmm.
Was really picked up on by the audience. The audience was like, "Oh, it's Betty looking into the crystal that tells her the darkest time of the North Pole was during the reign of the Mad Santa," she mentions. And again, it was a little bit of a throwaway, but the audience really responded to it, wondering who the Mad Santa was and whether we would get to meet him. And it stuck in both my imagination and Jack's imagination, and simultaneously, Eric Stonestreet had reached out to both of us saying that he was obsessed with the first season. He watched it with his soon-to-be stepsons, and he just had an amazing, and he's always wanted to play sort of in the world of Santa. So we had Eric in mind, knowing that he was a fan, and kind of created this new villain for the second season around him. And the key to it, and the key to upping the ante in the second season, was creating the Mad Santa as a kind of more formidable opposing force than we had in the first season. And Eric had a ball creating the character because his goal was to create the kind of like funny, formidable, a little bit scary, but also oddly lovable classic Disney villain like Cruella de Vil.
Yes.
That kids don't know quite whether they want to hug or run away from. And I think he really towed that line and helped us raise the ante, both on the comedy of the second season and also the kind of stakes.
Well, the comedy, especially when we're talking about Eric and his portrayal of Mad Santa, because it's now 700 years later, and he is in a world he does not know. So much of the comedy just comes from that fish out of water aspect.
Yeah, it's really fun.
But then
and of course, his dynamic with Gabriel Iglesias, such funny, sort of innocent character, and Chris Kringle Moreno, that's his name, and he owns a Santa-themed amusement park called Santopolis. But again, Chris is a character you recognize insofar as we all have a relative or a friend that is just like totally obsessed with Christmas as an adult, and Gabriel Iglesias sort of represents that guy, which is funny but also real and relatable, like we said at the beginning.
Watching Eric and Gabriel play off of each other, casting Gabriel as Chris, so smart with him playing against Eric, because it's Chris's joviality and pure joy and love of Christmas that softens the villainy of Mad Santa.
That's right.
Because I think if we didn't have Chris, I think Mad Santa would have been a little darker than we would expect from a family-friendly Disney Christmas Santa movie.
That's right. And then you have, if Chris is the angel on his shoulder, you have the devil on his shoulder in his sidekick, Gnome, played by Marta Kessler as Olga.
She is hilarious.
So funny, right?
Hilarious.
Her little Russian accent, it's so perfect. She's so funny as a sidekick and frankly comedy partner to Eric. It's so funny to say that Eric, as a grown man, has like comedic chemistry with this 11-year-old girl, but he absolutely does. They're just so funny together.
Well, and that's something that really stands out in this second series of the Santa Claus, in the second season of the Santa Clauses, is that the pairings. We have a lot of comedy duos that are really blossoming and going forward. Tim is standalone in terms of comedy. He's there and everybody else is just around him. But then we really get to see things. We have Betty and Noel are expanded this year, even though, we miss Betty for a couple of episodes.
Right.
Although we don't really miss her thanks to Noel's obsession with Betty. We've got Olga and Mad Santa. We've got Sandra really embracing a friendship and an aunt-niece dynamic with La Befana.
Right.
It really, and then we've got Carol, who's desperately trying to help Gary.
Carol and Gary are unsung as a comedy duo.
Ah.
They are really funny together. That kid who plays Gary is hysterical and really found that character, really kind of invented that character. And the writers just have so much fun writing that dynamic with Carol and Gary.
And then the way that you've shot this, Jason, the scene where he's eating a crusted thing of pudding out of the trash, and your editing is so sharp that we immediately see Carol's face. And so much of what we get from Elizabeth Mitchell, we get a lot of reactive shots to things that are going on around her. And she is very facially expressive as a comedian.
Yeah, again, Elizabeth Mitchell, I mean, from the beginning, really unsung hero of the franchise. She's so warm and so lovable. And we've actually had a tremendous amount of fun in the second season getting her angry a little bit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's actually a theme of her between her and Sandra, that you know, it's okay to express yourself, to express your emotions. And that's one of the sort of hopefully relatable parenting themes that are in here.
Every mother-daughter in the world is going to be able to relate to that as they think back on their lives, either in that moment or in the past, that, yep, I get it. I've been there, done that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you tapped into everything that is relatable in the real world. And the fact that Santa's family faces the same kind of challenges and issues that the rest of us do.
Right.
That kind of makes it okay because it's Santa.
That's right. And yeah, the whole goal here is to make the show really fun for parents to watch with their kids.
Yeah.
There's lots of stuff, I think, these days out there where, you know, you turn on the TV and it's good for the kids. But, you know, as the parents, I can say this as the father of a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, you know, it kind of makes your eyes bleed. You got to be on your phone. Whereas hopefully with this show, there's a ton for the parents to laugh at, the parents to get invested in, whether it's the music or the subtly sophisticated jokes coming from Jack Burditt, you know, the creator of 30 Rock, along with his team, that are providing this really special tone. Of course, everything is in there for the kids almost intrinsically. You have, you know, the magical world, the elves, Santa. Kids are going to want to watch this, but the trick really is making it fun for the parents too.
Yeah, and you absolutely do. I mean, the dialogue, so many double entendres, very tongue-in-cheek, and I was roaring. I was laughing myself silly as I'm watching this. And, you know, yes, little kids are not going to get it, but parents are definitely going to pick up on the humor.
That's right.
And I just think that's spectacular.
I try and I have my own directorial flourishes that are aimed at the parents recognizing, most particularly, you know, as Jack sort of shared with me in the early going that he really wanted to delve into the history of the North Pole with the second season. I thought to myself, well, what's the greatest sequel ever that dives into the history of the subject matter, and that's The Godfather Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a lot of stylistic elements from The Godfather Part 2 and used them here in the North Pole. So all the flashbacks do the same slow dissolve from the contrasting one relevant modern image with a contrasting relevant historical image, and the score is intended to evoke The Godfather 2. All of the design of the North Pole, when we flash back to it in that era, is because we're really telling an immigrant story with the elves having migrated from Europe to the North Pole. We designed it to look like Ellis Island, all of their tattered clothes and the look of the encampment that we flash back to is all intended to evoke in the parents watching, whether they recognize it sort of, consciously or not. It's The Godfather Part 2, which, frankly, parodying other films and film styles is another thing that is subtly a building block of this franchise. There's all kinds of those things, going back to, say, like the big slow motion football sequence in the second movie. You know, that's parodying like The Longest Yard. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So there's like a history within this franchise of referencing other elements of pop culture, and that's what we were doing here with The Godfather Part 2.
And I think you did a beautiful job with that. And also, what it lets you do, the directorial flourishes that I really love from a technical standpoint. I love that you've incorporated slow-mo. I love we get more of it's almost a sepia tone almost, just because of the production design. But your use of dissolves. It's so rare. We don't see that in television. We don't see things like that.
Kind of what's cool about this, too, is like this is a hybrid. You know, there's some people that, you know, online trolls complain, why isn't this a movie? And we're like, well, the kind of limited streaming series, there's elements of that basically is the movie business now.
Yeah.
So that's what this is. It's kind of a hybrid. It's really a movie broken up into 6 episodes to enjoy with the family over the holidays. That's kind of what it is. And we're embracing that as kind of a new storytelling format. Taking advantage, I think, of the episodic structure, but also telling a propulsive story that makes you want to keep watching through the end.
Absolutely. But I'm so happy to see the cinematic elements really being brought to the forefront in a series like this, so that it does feel like a film. And when people are like me and you sit there and you watch all the episodes at one time and you do not even get up for a bathroom break, I want something cinematic. And boy, oh boy, did I get it from you.
That's the best. Thank you so much.
How challenging is the editing process for the Santa Clauses, especially the way you've upped the ante with story development, character development, and comedy with this second season? Because comedy's never easy anyway to cut.
Yes. What's challenging is the schedule. We get word from Disney Plus that the season is a go, you know, in December. And then writing happens in lightning speed, and you know the series is still being rewritten as we're shooting. Mm-hmm. So we really have to go with the flow. The schedule is crazy given all the restrictions around the kids' hours. And then once we get into post, it's also lightning speed because we have to finish the series with enough time to get all the visual effects done, which take a long time. And then Disney needs a whole lot of time to translate the show into many languages because it drops day and date around the world. So it's the whole thing is a real race, and that's the challenge. In spite of it only being 6 episodes, we have 3 editors, which is a little unusual. But we're able to keep them all on the same page and keep them tonally united because they're editors that I've worked with for many years across different projects. So I know them all very well. They know each other, and we kind of function together as a little post-production ensemble.
Wow. Is it difficult to find the comedy beats with this one?
It's not hard to find the comedy beats. The world is so much fun, and the actors are having so much fun playing these characters that finding the comedy is not difficult in post, to be honest. I mean, it's obviously, it always gets better as we go along and as we try things, you know, and experiment with things. Actually, it's the action and sort of stakes are trickier because we're always walking a line in this show between we want the stakes to feel real, we want there to feel like danger, but at the same time, it's for kids and families, so you don't want it to be scary, but it is the stakes and the notion that everything could go wrong that keeps you watching. So you have to balance that with the comedy and also make sure that the payoff feels worthwhile, that by the time we get to the 6 episodes, all the fireworks we've been promising are really
Yeah, and this one, as I said earlier, it does go darker than the first season did. I'm going to have to ask you a last question here, Jason, about the fabulous meld. We have the visuals of that bring us all the nostalgia that we know from the season one and from the Santa Claus movie franchise. We've got a great score happening here that changes things up from what might be a traditional TV scoring. But then you give us these poppy fun needle drops and partying with elves.
Yep.
How do you find, what were you looking for musically so that it would complement your visuals and the story and also even give a little bump up, from the sonic element?
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that because we have an incredible composer who is also a world-renowned music producer named Ariel Reichtag, who we brought into the first season because we had this idea that music was going to be a big part of the series. And he has delivered not just a score that is kind of an extension of the big cinematic score that was great in the movies. So we have borrowed a lot of the tone of that and built on that. But into it, we've woven lots of Christmas carol melodies that function sort of thematically and that are woven through the score. And then on top of that, he produces many of the original versions of needle drop songs that are in the show. And this season, we have the elves singing a Billy Idol classic that he produced. And again, that's what I was talking about with music that appeals to the sensibilities of the parents. The kids might not recognize the song, but the parents will. And if we're lucky enough to do a third season, we'll have enough original tracks to really release a proper soundtrack for 3 seasons combined. You'll be able to find these tracks out there in the world from this season, but my dream is to put it all together and really put out a soundtrack of these original songs.
Oh, I would love that. But more than that, I want season 3 now, Jason. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Well, the show is a giant hit for Disney Plus. Season 3 feels while it's never a certainty, it feels like we got a good shot.
Well, and if we get a season 3, I want another cameo from Bernard.
The truth is, there's so many cameos. We have lots of cameos.
Oh, I know.
From obviously the legendary figures, and even the Judy the elf, who's the elf who hands
the hot chocolate, the cocoa.
In the original movie, we've tracked her down, and she makes a secret cameo as the proprietor of Judy's hot cocoa stand at Centopolis. So we literally bend over backwards to connect our series to the original movies and create Easter eggs for the fans. And we have so many cameos, though, and so many roles, frankly, that we would love to make. And hopefully we get to do a season 3, and we can scratch all those itches for the fans.
Oh, I would love it. Jason, thank you so much. Thank you for giving me season 1 and season 2, and my fingers and toes are crossed for season 3. That is on my Christmas wish list.
Thank you for being such a fan. I really appreciate all the positive feedback.